Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm starting with the question which was asked for the most, which is question 2D, which is also known as the writer's craft questions. It can be found in an IGCSE paper from text C. Now, we call this question language analysis as well, because what you do in this question is that you're actually analyzing language, but a lot of kids aren't really aware of what analysis actually is. And especially when you bring that analysis alongside language, how do you end up with an answer that is sufficient for the examiner to give you a grade? We're going to talk about all of these things. Let's take a look at what the question looks like, and so we can move forward from there. Now, paragraph 1 begins with this. They always give you two paragraphs. In this case, we have paragraph 1 and we have paragraph 2. And they're saying the paragraph begins with this and is actually about Celia and her elephant babies visiting the narrator and Lawrence's home on River Game Reserve. Please remember that a question like this has multiple parts. So we have multiple parts, which is that the first part tells you what the paragraph begins with, and the second part tells you what the paragraph is about. What you are supposed to do is you are supposed to look at this specific paragraph. You're supposed to keep in mind what the paragraph is about, and once you have that under control, then what you do is that you pick out 3 examples of words or phrases from each paragraph. So what are we doing? We are looking at a paragraph. We are looking at what the paragraph is about, and then from each of these paragraphs, we are picking out 3 examples of words or phrases, I'll talk about this in a bit as well, to actually show how the writer conveys meaning and creates effect. Now, this can be slightly tricky, which is understandably very confusing for students. So we're now going to move forward and see how you can do all of that. There's another very interesting thing which the examiners are generally showing you, which is your choices should include the use of imagery. So what is imagery, and how do you include this in your answer, because the question says it should include? And then what is the word limit? The word limit is about 200 to 300 words, and the marks are about 15. So what do we have so far? We have 2 paragraphs. From each paragraph, you're picking out 3 examples of words or phrases that convey meaning and create effect. What else do we have? It can also, or it should have, imagery, and then the word limit is this, and the marks are this. So far we have some skeletal format of what we're doing and how do we proceed. Now, there are multiple things that I want you to keep in mind as we move ahead before I solve these things for you. What are a few things that examiners are expecting out of you? If you can take a screenshot of this as well, or you can write this down as well. Anything works. You're going to select powerful or unusual words. So when you take a look at the paragraph, which we are going to look at in a bit here, and of course I will show you all of these things, you're going to pick out powerful words or phrases. What do we mean by that? Powerful words or phrases means any word that signifies a very strong idea. So random words, I can write it down here as well, that random or vague words just won't do. So please keep in mind that we are looking at slightly interesting, engaging words. What is the next thing that they're saying? You have to show the examiner that you have some kind of understanding as to how language works. For example, I'll just give you a brief example. If the writer has gone on to use a metaphor, you are going to have to show the examiner why that metaphor is effective. Not that identifying the metaphor is enough, because there's no mark for identification. You have to show the examiner why that metaphor is effective. If the writer has used a metaphor, there has to be a reason why the writer used it. You are supposed to get to that reason. Then, Another very important concept is connotations. Now, connotations, for those of you who don't know, are actually word associations. Now, again, I can teach you connotations here in this video, but just to let you know that certain words carry certain kind of feelings with them, or certain words are either positive or either negative, and they create a certain kind of an atmosphere when that specific word is used. That is something that the examiner wants you to capture. For those of you who don't know, an atmosphere actually means a vibe. In very simple words, the vibe that's being generated, right? Let's move forward. What's another thing that you should know about this question? That you are marked holistically for the overall response. What this means is that I'm not going to say that if there are 3 examples from one paragraph and 3 examples from one paragraph, so collectively there are 6 examples, that every example has about 2.5 or 2 marks. I can't say that, and it's wrong if some teacher tells you that, because the answer is marked holistically. Holistically means on the whole, together. Next, what is the next thing that the examiner wants you to know? That for higher bands, and by higher bands I mean we are looking at 12 to 15 marks out of 15, there has to be what? There has to be a range of choices. So avoid similar examples is what I'm saying. I will write it down here for you guys as well, so you remember, avoid similar examples. Let's do the next one. They should explain images of some kind, if there is any kind of an image. What do we mean by image? We're generally looking at some form of descriptive language. If that is not there, then of course connotations and nuances are always there. And lastly, and most importantly, at the end of the day, why is your friend getting a mark but you're not getting a mark? Chances are that his or her quality of analysis is better than yours. So work on the quality of your analysis as well. Now that we have built on this skeletal format of this question, let's move ahead and see what good responses actually have, and then we're going to go and solve something. So, examiners are telling you that you can make any sensible comment. What that means is that even if the comment is not in the mark scheme, but it is still relevant to the question that you have, you will get a mark. Moving forward, if you have to solve this question, please bear in mind that you can either comment on vocabulary choices or you can comment on non-vocabulary choices. Again, please remember that question 2D is one of those responses, or the answer to question 2D is one of those things which actually tests a child's ability in how good they are in language, which means that, in simple words, if you struggle with English, then there's a very high chance that you might struggle with question 2D, because 2D is, you can say, a top tier question. Top tier question means that it's going to test the ability of kids, those kids who are really, really good at English. So if you're struggling with English, you might struggle with this. But with some practice, you can get a good grade in this, even if not the top grade. So what do we mean by vocabulary choices? Vocabulary choices are multiple things. Vocabulary choices could be parts of speech. For example, in the example that you may choose, it could be an adjective, it could be an adverb, it could be a verb, in which case it could be a dynamic verb or a static verb. It could be a noun, and you may comment on that, or it could be a literary device, and I hope you know what literary devices are. Literary devices could be like similes and metaphors and all of those things. It could be a phonetic device. Phonetic devices are sound devices. So for example, alliteration or sibilance or assonance, etc. It could be that. It could be some kind of repetition, and you could comment on that. Or it could be that imagery that we just discussed a while ago. We have 5 kinds of imageries, visual imageries and sound imageries, and auditory is sound imagery, gustatory imagery, which is the taste imagery, and all of those things. So basically 5 senses based imageries. Or it could be non-vocabulary choices, which means that you may be able to comment on grammar, Syntax, those of you who don't know what syntax is sentence structure or simply sentence type. So whether the sentences are long, you may comment on that. Whether the sentences are short, you may comment on that. Whether the sentence is a command, which we call an imperative, you can comment on that. The sentence could be a declarative sentence. The sentence could be an interrogative sentence. The sentence could be an exclamatory sentence. So the types of sentences can be commented on as well. Punctuation devices, what do I mean by that? Punctuation devices are if there is an exclamation mark, which means, for example, if somebody says hurrah somewhere and then there's an exclamation mark, then of course it shows a certain kind of an enthusiasm, then I can comment on that. If there's a question mark, if there's a full stop, there's a semicolon, if I feel like I can comment on that, I can absolutely do that. What is the one thing that the examiners want you to remember and understand? That these non-vocabulary choices have to be additional to comments on vocabulary, which means that if you are commenting on, for example, an adjective or an adverb, maybe you are commenting on this or you're commenting on this, all of these have to be additional to this. So you have to comment on adjective and you have to comment on similes, for example, and then you have to comment on either one of these. So you can't comment on non-vocabulary choices individually. All right, let's move forward to solving an actual question. I'll come to this in a bit, and then I can show you how this goes. Now, paragraph begins. I showed you the question a while ago. Paragraph begins with whenever Celia. So now I know that I have the right question here with me, and then it says that this question is about Celia and her elephant babies visiting the narrator and Lawrence's home on River Game Reserve, which means that the 3 examples that I have to pick out have to be about Celia and her elephant babies when they were visiting the narrator, who is the writer, and Lawrence's home on River Game Reserve. Those of you who haven't read the text, it's a very interesting text. You can take a look at this. So any example from this paragraph that I have in front of me that gives me an idea of Celia's visit to the River Game Reserve, I can take that forward. By the way, before I even go on to solving one question out of this or one example out of this, I want to just let you know, by the way, that the shorter the example, the better. So please try to, the shorter the example, the better. Please try to ensure that the examples that you pick to comment on, they are very, very short. Why am I saying this? Because if you have long examples, then you are going to end up with, and this happens to every kid, you're going to end up discussing some part of the example, and some part of the example is going to be left undiscussed, and this is going to leave a very bad impression on the examiner. So what do I mean by short examples? 1 word, 2 words, 3 words, 4 words. I'll show you a single word example as well. I'll show you, different examples, longer examples as well, just to let you know how things are. So let's take a look at a few examples that I can comment on. Whenever Celia, the lead elephant, and her herd visit. Now, there's no example in here because none of this tells me anything about her visit. However, as soon as I move forward, it says their trunks immediately curl up like periscopes to scan our house. This is one example because it shows me that whenever Celia visits the River Game Reserve, the trunks are immediately curling up. So this can be an example. What other example can I take forward? They start to wonder. Now, the use of the word wonder here, I can absolutely comment on this. Let's move forward and see what other examples I can have. Are they at home? Is that appetizing whiff coming from their bountiful fruit trees? So appetizing whiff can be an example. Bountiful fruit trees can be an example. Would a daring fruit raid be within the realms of the possibility? Daring fruit raid can absolutely be an example. Realms of possibility, because they are exploring the chances of them going forward with that fruit raid, can be an example. Our cat finds his blissful slumbers. This absolutely shows me a certain kind of a connection with the home, because blissful is happy and slumbers are sleep. So this goes on to show a sense of deep peace and comfort. So I can absolutely comment on this as well. And then on the patio, rudely disturbed, I can absolutely talk about rudely disturbed here as well. Then the exuberant elephant babies, I can absolutely talk about exuberant elephant babies, gleefully charging as well, if that is something that I have in mind. After him along the length of the wire fence that borders our garden, nothing interesting here. Their bodies, a gangling bundle of floppy ears and tiny swinging trunks. So a gangling bundle of floppy ears or tiny swinging trunks can be an example as well. So all of these words that I have highlighted can be taken forward as examples. How do I know that these can be taken as examples forward, or why have I chosen these specific words and nothing else? Number one, I told you a while ago that we have to select powerful or unusual words. So any unusual, interesting, engaging word, anything that gives me any kind of a description, a narration, a specific action, a specific scene, anything that captures anything of that sort related to this, guys, please keep in mind, related to this is anything that I will take forward as my example. Now, I told you a while ago that the shorter the example, the better. This one is a one-word example. So I can comment on this. I will do that right now. And just to let you know, this is a one-word example. This is a two-word example. And let me see if I have a three-word example here somewhere. Right, so bountiful fruit trees, three-word example. And then realms of possibility is also a three-word example. Gangling bundle of floppy ears, four-word example. So what I've tried to do is to give you an idea of how you can have three-word examples, two-word examples, one-word example, and four-word, and of course longer than that as well. So if I am to solve a question like this, let me see. Let's start with the one-word example that we have, and then I can move forward. So the one-word example that I have chosen is wonder. And whenever a person wonders something, it's a kind of a verb in a way. So I can write down that. All right, let's start with this. The verb wonder is suggestive of the idea that these elephants are almost human-like. How do I know that? Because these elephants are wondering. By the way, do you know which part of which literary device is this? Whenever we give non-human beings the ability of human beings, that's actually personification. But because elephants are human beings and they are being personified here, we can use the word personification if you feel like. I wouldn't say that. I'm simply going to use the word verb here as a start to wonder, and then I'm going to just stay with that. All right, they are almost human-like and are capable of thinking and planning instead of acting on impulse. So they are not impulsive. It also implies, please take a look at the words that I'm using. Suggestive and implies. Look at these keywords that I'm using and how examiner will give me a mark for this. It also implies that they are considering possibilities and weighing up their options, which gives them a certain kind of personality. So what am I actually doing? I'm using this one word, and by using this word, I'm trying to talk about Celia and the elephant baby. Celia, by the way, is the lead elephant. So I'm trying to explore Celia's personality, or the elephant babies and their personality, and thereby I'm trying to give the examiner some kind of an insight into what these people are. Now, there are a lot of kids that are under the impression that we have to talk about the effect on the readers as well. So if you want to add a sentence like that, I can absolutely do that as well. It gives the readers, or it gives the reader, let's say, instead of giving, let's write down allows. It allows the reader to imagine them as regular visitors who are aware of the reserve well. Full stop. And that's about it. So if I break down my answer, what have I done so far? I have identified that this is a word, this is a verb. Then I have identified one example. I've used the keyword suggestive, implies, and imagine. So these are the three keywords that I have used, which is something that examiners want. Please remember that I have nowhere have I said that the word wonder means to, sort of be curious or be inquisitive. So I haven't given the literal meaning of the word. This is something that a lot of kids, mistake generally in, which is that they start giving the literal meanings of the words. You are not going to say that. You're going to imply, like I said here, that they are considering possibilities, they are weighing their options, it gives them a personality, they're almost human-like, they're capable of thinking and planning, they are not acting on impulse, and it makes me feel like they are regular visitors. So this is all that I have, in a way, you can say that I have deduced from a single word, which is wonder. These are all deductions that I've made from the word wonder. How do I know all this, and why do I know all this? Because I've put the word wonder alongside this description that I have, and then I just started writing based on this. So please remember to pick a short example and then link it to this example and see how it makes sense, and then just try and explore the example. All right. This is another advice section that I have here. So I'm going to quickly go through this, and then we are going to bring this to a close. What are a few things that you have to keep in mind? Please remember to have connotations. By the way, if you want to ask me what connotations are in here, the fact that the word wonder gives them a kind of personality is connotations of the word wonder. Wonder is a positive word. Whenever I use the word wonder for someone, it makes me feel like they have a certain kind of a curious personality. So this is basically a connotative word. Connotative word. All right, let's move forward. Rather than identifying literary devices, please engage fully. Please remember that there are no marks for identification, so do not simply identify that this is a metaphor and this is a simile and this is this and this is that. You're not going to get the mark. You have to consider the impact. The fact that this word made me feel like, it's almost human-like and the elephant is capable of thinking, that is something that will get me the mark. 3 examples from each paragraph. Please keep that in mind. Number 2, avoid literal meanings. We have to keep that in mind as well. Most importantly, do not use statements like these. This helps the reader imagine the scene. This creates a strong visual image for the reader. This allows the reader to interact with the text. This makes the reader feel less bored. This is an example of a powerful language. Do not do that. It is a very big problem if you end up doing it, because that is going to be a problem. Let's move forward. Always start with the contextualized meaning. If there is a specific meaning in a text, you can engage with it. However, examiners actually give you marks for an understanding of the situation, characters, and the atmosphere. Avoid repeating the same explanation of effects. Please keep that in mind as well. And lastly, it is the quality of your language analysis which is going to get you the mark, and not one example on its own. So all three examples, when you put them together, this is something that will get you the mark. So it's the quality of your language analysis, not in fact one example at a time. So this is something that you can keep in mind for this. I'm going to stay here for 1 or 2 seconds so you can take a quick screenshot of this. By the way, I have made a PDF of 2D and how you can make it better. I'm going to be sharing this on Instagram, so please ensure that you text me on it and get that link for yourselves. Thank you guys. I'll see you with the next video.